What a week in Washington, D.C. On Capitol Hill, the chiefs of intelligence testify before a Senate committee. And in one of the most highly anticipated hearings in recent memory, former FBI Director Jim Comey also appears before the committee. Meanwhile, from the White House, it's Donald Trump's Twitter feed that everyone's paying attention to. But while these are happening, what's going on with the rest of our government? Despite soaring rhetoric of restoring the economy, revamping health care, and rebuilding America's infrastructure, among other agenda items, nothing seems to be moving from rhetoric to policy. We'll talk about this and more with former U.S. Representative David Jolly, Republican of Florida, joining us from Washington.
Great to be with you, Larry.
Okay, we're kind of in a mess. We're taping this the day before the Comey testimony, and we're playing it after, so we don't know what he said or what happened. So let's get to some other areas. There's such disarray. We don't have ambassadors. We don't have U.S. attorneys. I don't know what legislation we have moving, where it stands, what's happening.
Right.
What's going on?
Well, so Larry, welcome to Infrastructure Week in Washington, D.C. That's what Donald Trump suggested this week was going to be about. And then he set about to insult the London mayor, obviously is having to suffer the consequence of testimony from all of our intelligence chiefs. This week we've seen Coates and Rogers and obviously Comey as well. And listen, at the end of the day, you can't get away from the investigation story. It's why we have Mueller as the special counsel. And I do think, regardless of how the testimonies continue to develop, right? Clapper testifies, Democrats declare a win. Coates and Rogers testify, Republicans declare a win. I think what this comes down to is, are there documents or tapes, right? If we're in a he said situation, where's the evidence? And frankly, if there is none and no documents or tapes can be produced, then perhaps Donald Trump survives this. But if there is something that ultimately leads to the president having to go under oath for anything, I do think his undoing might be that he commits perjury.
So are we at a standstill?
You know, we are until something breaks, right? So listen, Donald Trump himself, he was the one who raised the issue that there might be White House tapes. Well, one of the most consequential questions in this investigation is, did the President of the United States try to unduly influence the nation's chief law enforcement officer, Jim Comey, who apparently has suggested he did and has memos to support that? That is what it will take. Listen, if you go back to the Clinton impeachment days, and I know a lot of people have strong feelings on both sides, but that was a special counsel investigation that started with a land deal in Arkansas, led to an investigation, the dismissal of the White House Travel Office, then the suicide of Vince Foster. But ultimately what got President Clinton was he lied under oath. And so wherever this investigation goes, the real consequence for this president is if he ever has to go under oath. And we don't know if that will happen or not. But if so, that will be a dark day for the president.
What legislation do you think will get passed this year?
You know, that's a tough question. I mean, the President of the United States this week, something that was overlooked, held a fake bill signing ceremony. It looked like a moment out of state-run media. He had the vice president introduce him at the White House, and he unveiled, frankly, an infrastructure plan related to air traffic control that's been on the shelf for 10 years, and then had a fake bill signing ceremony over something that hasn't even been passed through the Congress. Listen, he blew his opportunity to have a bipartisan infrastructure deal. This is a president who, the night after his inauguration, should have had Chuck Schumer to the White House and share a cigar. Instead, he has attacked everybody in this town. And I don't know that much gets done. I mean, healthcare is a big question. Will they get a little bit of incremental work done on healthcare? Will they get some tax reform? I don't know. And you're starting to see Wall Street really worry that perhaps the agenda's dead in Washington, D.C.
As a Republican who is critical of his president, are you on the outs in the party? Where's David Jolly?
Listen, as intense as the Trump base is, I promise you I feel it every day. John Kasich said something that I hold true to every day. We all get to fight for what we believe republicanism should be and conservatism should be. I do think there's a train wreck coming, and I hope there's enough of us still around to pick up the pieces. Listen, I'm not a never Trumper. Yeah, I thought it was wrong when Mitch McConnell said our #1 job is to defeat Barack Obama. We should all want our presidents to succeed. That includes Barack Obama. That includes President Trump, but at the same time, we got to call balls and strikes. And it's hypocritical intellectually for Republicans right now to look the other way at a president who has had a disastrous first 4 or 5 months, has a special counsel who has been appointed, and frankly has offended the world stage from our NATO allies to anyone else that is looking upon the United States for leadership right now. This is a bad president who has had a terrible rollout. Can he recover? I hope so as an American. I don't know that I'll ever embrace him as a leader of the party because I have a very different vision for the GOP. But right now, he's the president.
During the Civil Rights Bill controversy, when Everett Dirksen moved the Republican Party to pass that bill under Lyndon Johnson, and Dirksen, a very strong Republican, I interviewed him, and he said, when you get down to nuts and bolts and moral issues and important issues, it's always country over party.
It's a different era, Larry. I'd love to be interviewing you right now about that. I don't know that we're seeing that. And listen, the hypocrisy is on both sides of the aisle. A perfect example is on the use of executive orders. Republicans beat up Obama for using them, but they've embraced Trump's use of them. Democrats defended Obama, but now they've criticized Trump. This town is all about power and who can stay in power or who can topple the party that's in power. And it's unfortunate because we really are at a tough moment. Listen, go back to what happened in Manchester and London. Bush 43, think about Bush 43. He came in with some controversy. He had lost the popular vote, won the Electoral College. 9 months later, he was a war president. I don't know that our nation today in this environment, this country first suggestion that you have that should be what we abide by, I don't know that we're ready for a national crisis under a President Donald Trump, nor do I know that he is either. If the glimpse we saw after Manchester of President Trump's leadership is any indication of how he would handle a domestic attack, I don't know that we have a nation ready to get behind this president, and that's a serious issue. That's not a political one. The bygone eras, as you speak to, again, I'd love to interview you on this. We need to recapture that somehow going forward.
Well, those were the days when I could name every senator, when Goldwater and Humphrey went to dinner together. That doesn't happen anymore.
It doesn't. And Donald Trump, listen, a lot of Republicans were looking for a leader to bring us back from the Tea Party. And frankly, Donald Trump is not a seasoned conservative Republican. He could have been the deal maker with Chuck Schumer. You could have seen a rebirth of the Ronald Reagan-Tip O'Neill relationship. But he squandered that opportunity when he started attacking the press and the judiciary and political opponents, and when he took on a tone of division and not one of unity. Listen, if Donald Trump as a Republican used the soaring rhetoric of Barack Obama as a Democrat, we could have a very special president, but I believe he's blown that chance.
What do you think of Christopher Wray as head of the FBI?
You know, it's interesting that he's such an unknown quantity, and I think that's probably a safe pick. I think you're hearing a lot of people come out and say perhaps this is a person that could be independent. The hearings in the Senate will be dispositive, in my opinion. You know, folks who, I often say, just because Donald Trump does something doesn't mean it's wrong, right? We're so used, we're wired to think that. Perhaps he's a good pick. We will see how he does in the hearing. If he survives the hearing, then that says something. But there's a lot of opposition research, I'm sure, going into the pick right now because it is the job of the Senate to provide that type of due diligence and oversight. So I think the verdict's still out on Wray.
I'll make a deal with you, David. Next time in Washington, we'll have lunch, and I'll tell you all about the 60s.
I'd love to hear it. I'll tell you about 80s hairband rock and roll. How's that?
Yeah. Thank you, David.
You got it. Thank you, Larry.